Hi, everyone. Welcome in. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight for our zine-making workshop with Emilee Wirshing. For those of you who might not know me, my name is Kathleen Kuo, and I am a program manager with Nevada Humanities, which is our state's council partner with the National Endowment for the Humanities. So our zine-making workshop tonight is part of our Nevada Reads program. Nevada Reads is our statewide book club of sorts where every year Nevada Humanities selects books along specific topics or themes that we feel matter to our communities across the state. So this year, we are highlighting 4 books that actually speak to the importance of family, roots, folklore, technology, and human connection. And those books are Thistlefoot by GennaRose Nethercott, which is the inspiration for tonight's zine-making workshop. Wandering in Strange Lands, A Daughter of the Great Migration Reclaims Her Roots by Morgan Jerkins. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, and Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Dewar. So if you haven't read any of these books yet, totally okay. There's always time to read. We highly encourage you to find a copy at your local library or independent bookstore, and to also keep an eye on our Nevada Humanities website for online and in-person events that are going to feature these authors this year and next, especially if you live in Nevada. It's always exciting to meet authors in person. So tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce our zine workshop leader, Emilee Wirshing. Emilee is a librarian, a poet, a lifelong Nevadan, and much, much more. She advocates for local poets and creativity by hosting various poetry open mic nights and writing workshops in the community. Her work appears in anthologies Clark, Legs of Tumbleweed, Wings of Lace, and Sandstone and Silver, along with various local and national literary magazines. Her chapbook, American Dream Houses, was published in March 2020 by Tolson Books, and you can find Emilee's typewriter poetry on Instagram at Lavender Typewriter. We have more information on our event page on our Nevada Humanities website if you'd like to follow along with us tonight, which includes a PDF handout of how to fold and create a zine, but that's totally optional. Emilee will demonstrate all of this tonight for you. Please also note that tonight's event is a webinar, so the audio and video is turned off for all of our participants, but this event is recorded and we're going to share it on our Nevada Humanities YouTube channel later, and we're also simultaneously live streaming this on our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/humanities@play. So if you're watching us on Twitch tonight, hello, thank you so much for joining us. I'll make sure if you have any questions in Twitch to relay those comments and questions to Emilee on our Zoom call. And for everyone who's joining us on Zoom tonight, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to type them into chat. Make sure it's going to all panelists and attendees on Zoom so everyone can see what you say. And I think that's about it. So Emilee, I'm going to let you take it away. I'm super excited. I loved Thistlefoot. I always love working with you. So, all right, Emilee, you are up.
Oh, awesome. Hello. How is everyone doing? I saw some of the chat pop up. I saw some names I recognized. Hey, Dulce. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm really excited. This is my first webinar class type of thing, so it's going to be awesome and weird. So this book is amazing. If you haven't read it, I'm a huge, huge fan. I think the writing was really strong. I think that it told some of the most important and difficult parts of a story. And that's really what I want to focus on today with the zines. A zine is a super small piece of paper folded a really particular way, and it doesn't have room to tell everything. But it's a great way to tell a new perspective on stories. So thank you so much for the introduction, Kathleen. That was gorgeous. I'm Emilee. I feel like I probably know some people, but I've worked a lot in the community putting on workshops and watching people do workshops. So I hope I do that tradition justice. So a zine is a very, very small publication. So if you're not familiar with zines, or you've never folded a zine, or you've never purchased a zine, usually these will be sold by indie authors or as sort of like a propaganda piece. They are a really beautiful way to create something unique and small and pocketable. So I was drawn to zines. I found zines in the pandemic. And so I kind of lost my mind and wrote a bunch of zines over the time that we were closed. It was a therapy for me. It was a relief. It was a way to get what was in my head out. So I encourage you, if you are drawn to this art form or you're excited about zines in general, just kind of like work through them. I've probably made, I don't know, maybe 100 of them, and some of them are great, some of them are real cringy, some of them are terrible, and that's okay. Everything that you produce doesn't have to be magical, but this art form kind of invites us to put something together that's very small, and then you can build on it, you can redo it. So I do have some zines that we'll talk about with Thistlefoot in particular. I have made a zine with feet. If you haven't read the book, the house has feet. So that part's really fascinating and magical and strange. So what I want to focus on today with zines and with storytelling and with personal folklore is the idea that a story gets to be retold many, many ways. And so Thistlefoot, for example, is a story with many stories contained within it. And so it's the story of the present. There are siblings that are dealing with an inheritance that they're trying to kind of sort out. I'm going to try to do no spoilers. There's a woman in the past who lives a very strange and bizarre existence, but is super fascinating. There's loss, there's war, there's tragedy. And so as we move through a book like this that contains so much content, the narrator is able to, again, trying not to spoil, the narrator is able to create sympathy and empathy through telling and retelling the same story. And so there's a bunch of places where a scenario is either made more fantastic with its details or its strangeness, or it's made more personable or whole in the way that it's told. Sometimes things that are enormous, like big loss, big tragedy, in this case, types of genocide, are really removed from our experience because we don't have, unless you've gone through it and you have the trauma of that, you don't have a lot to hold on to. And so in this case, I thought GennaRose did a really beautiful job of creating a way for us to be more in tune with and connected to that part of the story, which for me in particular, and maybe some of you living in a modern world, living a modern life, that seems really separate from. For example, I don't know what it would be like to travel across the world and leave everything behind. I think that would be very difficult. But that essence is really captured here in a way that I felt was approachable. And so I felt like a zine workshop was really in tune with that, because you do have an approachableness to a very small art form. So kudos to GennaRose. This is a beautiful book. Writing a book this big would take a very long time. Writing a zine is an afternoon activity. So what I really like about poetry and about short form work is that you can approach it and you can deal with it in a short term, and you don't have to dedicate years and years of your life to it unless you want to. So second, I want to introduce my typewriter. So this is Ollie. This is an Olympia SN3 typewriter from 1960-ish, 1965. She didn't come purple. Somebody painted her purple and I bought her that way. And I really encourage you, as you process the way that you create, whether you do collage or writing or art or any sort of expression of yourself, that you explore options that are analog, because there's something really beautiful about the analog and about using your hands. We have a lot of science to back the way that our brain works and the way that we are able to connect with dopamine and joy through doing things with our hands. And so this is a great example of something that you can make very quickly. And so I'm seeing some of the chats pop up. People love this book. I really think if you haven't read it, if you're in this workshop and you haven't read it, please, please, please read it. It's been such a really wonderful world to step into. And I couldn't recommend it any more than I couldn't. It's so good. So I think the first thing we're going to start with is folding a zine. If you have not folded a zine before and you do have paper with you, and this part's a little bizarre because I'm just going to be doing it and I can't see you. So if anyone is like truly stuck, please jump in the chat. You're going to be taking a piece of paper that is kind of more or less this shape. You can use a piece of printer paper, you can use a piece of notebook paper, you can use any kind of paper. And it's not necessarily the size, but whatever you make is going to be a rectangle from this type of rectangle. I'm using a larger piece of paper. I think this one is like 9 by 13, but whatever you have is perfect. So to fold a zine, we're going to do a couple things that are really important. First of all, if you're folding something you've already created, we're going to define the front. Everything on the front is going to stay on the front, and one half is going to be top and one half is going to be bottom. If you're starting from a blank piece of paper, we're just going to start folding. We're going to make one fold in half. So I think this is hot dog, or no, hamburger. This one's hamburger. So we're going to fold in half and we're going to make that fold. So for those of you that are watching, I'm just going to push this down. So we make that fold. And then the most important thing about this whole piece is that you fold it back on itself. So I hope we're all following along. I'm so sorry for those of you that have done this before. If this is repetition. Now we're going to fold this way. This one's hamburger. So sorry. It's been a super long day. Hamburger fold. I mean, hot dog fold. Oh my goodness. This is being recorded. That'll be saved forever. So first hamburger, second hot dog. Can you tell I'm a vegetarian? I don't eat these. So we're gonna fold it down this way. And then again, just like before, we want to double our folds. The reason we're going to double our folds is because we are going to be moving front ways on some of them and back ways on the other ones. You'll see in a moment, but you don't want to be making that fold for the first time. Then you're going to find this middle line, this line here, and we're going to be folding to the middle. Those of you that do folding crafts or any kind of origami, this is a very familiar process. You take the outsides and you fold them in, and it makes kind of a door. I'll show you in a moment. So you should be able to fold. So now we've done this. Give you guys lots of angles and options, but we want to make sure we folded it both ways. So it's very flexible now. The whole paper, it moves both ways. It doesn't fight you in any direction. So you should, I don't know how visible it's going to be with the white on the white. You should be able to have 8 distinct pages. So your paper, if you're following along, should have 8 sections. I'm hoping that you're seeing them. Thanks. Perfect. So we're going to crisp this up a little bit more one more time. And then we're going to take our scissors, if you have scissors, and we're going to cut down the line. So now you have a little mouth. And this part's a little weird. So I'm going to do this a couple times. We're going to fold in half. We're going to leave the gap. And we're going to push it together. Push together. And now the pages are pretty happy to go this way. I'm going to start that again. We're going to have the page. We found our little mouth. It's kind of like a bird beak, which makes me think of Thistlefoot. Now we're going to fold. So this is a zine. If you've seen this before and you didn't know what it was called, that's what it's called. Zines have a really beautifully rich history in kind of indie presses, in any kind of like revolutionary media. It's a really beautiful way to make something very quickly. The cool part is once you do all the things you're going to do, whether you write on it, whether you type on it, and you unfold it, if this is the front, you can just scan this on a Xerox and make many, many copies. So it's this like quick reprintable thing. Yes, I can fold it one more time. So I'm gonna do a fresh piece of paper. I'm seeing a couple of folks in the chat who have questions. See, I thought I was going too slow. So here is our piece of paper. So we're gonna fold hamburger stuff. Folding, and just like, you know, make sure that it's got crisp corner to corner. Any kind of weirdness in your fold is going to make it hard on that final bit. So we've got, now we have this half this way. We're going to crease the other side. So a big part of this is making sure that you go both ways. So now that it's like this, we're going to fold in half this way, hot dog style. We're going to fold. We're going to fold this way. We're going to make sure we go back. And I cannot impress this on you enough. If you think you're going to save time on the folding part, you will not save time on the end when you're trying to make it all go together. So this part should be pretty easy. Now you have 1, 2, 3, 4 sections. Perfect. I hope you're all having a great time folding and no one is furious. It's okay if you're furious. We're here for you. Folding sometimes sucks. So here's the first part. We come inside, and we're going to come inside this way. I hope that that makes sense. Someone pop out in the chat if you are still stuck. Okay, so now we have our 8 sections. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. We're going to fold this in half again. Our very first fold, we're going to repeat it. And here we're going to cut, and I wasn't probably specific about this in the first part, so sorry. We're going to cut from this end. So we've got our folded end. We're going to cut from this end to this end while it's folded. So we're going to fold it. We've got the crease side with our scissor, and we're going to cut into the middle. So you halfway cut into this part. This part's open. This is our crease. So when you open it, it looks like a little mouth. I think this part's fun. And then you have all 4 sections still with this cut. If you cut here, that's totally fine. This is not going to work. Go grab another piece of paper. We will wait for you. If you cut on the outside, it's not going to work. You only can cut when you are like this on this seam. The reason for that is that the rest of this seam that we didn't cut becomes the top. So this is the top part. And now we're going to pinch it together, push kind of where this makes a diamond, push it together. So now you have like a pinwheel. And then I just like to, wherever it's most happy to be folded. You can fold anywhere. But once it's here, like the pages will kind of tell you, like, it doesn't want to go this way. It wants to go that way. Let the paper tell you which way it wants to go. That's very woo, but the paper has a grain in it. It's very hard to see, and it'll tell you which way it wants to go. So now we have it. We will fold again as we get towards the end. We'll be making some zines together. But does anybody have any questions? I do see the chat pop up. I can't hear you or see you. But if anybody is having just a horrible time, please type in your question. And if I don't see it right away, Kathleen will stop me. She promised she would. So this is our zine. The cool part about this is now you have an 8-page book, you have a 4-page book. It just kind of depends on how you define it. So this is a little hard to see because it's white. So I have one that's red and green. So this is my front. So the way that I do zines, and the way that I really like zines for poetry is you can put 3 or 4 poems in there. No, sorry. Let me say that again. You can put 5 or so poems in there that fit really nicely, down to maybe 3 poems, but you don't have to put a poem on each page. Oh yeah, thank you for connecting. In the handout on the last page, there's like a kind of a diagram. I didn't make the diagram. I borrowed it from the internet, but this is a really cool way to present 3 to 5 poems. And so I'll break that down for you guys just so you have a visual. So the front is like a cover. I always make the cover. I always make the front a cover. I usually don't start a poem right at the front. I want it to feel like a whole experience, right? Like you want to have some sort of introduction to the thing that you're picking up. So just like this book has an absolute beautiful cover, and I feel like I know what I'm about to get into, I want you to think about your zines in a way where you're approaching and you're coming into a conversation with what you're about to pick up or what your reader is about to pick up. So we really want to like couch their experience in some sort of normalcy. So we want to put a cover here. So your cover might just be the title. Your cover might just be an image. It might be something that calls back to the rest of the piece. And then on the back page, that's usually where I'll put my initials or the year. I'll leave this as the backspace. I usually don't put a poem on the last page. I usually don't put any text or collage on the last page. Again, because I want this to feel like a book. I want someone to pick this up and look at it and hold it and feel like they're about to read something important. And sometimes when we only have a little bit of space to use, our first instinct is to just cram in as much stuff as we possibly can fit in there. And I just want everything. I have so much to say. And what I would encourage you to do today and in this process, and as you work on this later, I hope you take this into the next part of your creativity. I want you to think about where you can trim. And this art form is so beautiful because it's so limited. You don't have very much room. You're probably not going to sneak things into the middle parts of the page. You're probably not going to hide little secrets in here. You're just telling a very quick perspective. And so I do want to talk a little bit about some of the zines I've made for Thistlefoot. So if you have read the book, you'll know that this house is named Thistlefoot, and this house has legs. And so Kathleen asked me to make a zine with legs. So I have done that. And so what I did, I made 2 zines for Thistlefoot, and we'll make another one today together. I know some of you have read the book. I don't know if you were able to bring any quotes that you like, or if you're sitting next to the book and you enjoy it. I have some pages we'll call out later. I know, thanks, Anna. Chicken legs. What I really like about working from other people's pieces, we're gonna try and like weave this all together because I'm all over the place. What I really like about working from other people's pieces is you can find inspiration in anything. I've taught many workshops on erasure poetry. If you've ever tried that, it's so much fun. And this is an exercise in found poetry that I've put together in these 2 zines. So the first is the chicken house. So I have put together some quotes, and basically what I did is I just pulled entire sections out of the book as is. This was sort of my first go at it. And then in this one, what I did was I typed out a whole section of the book and I tore it up and I put it in different orders. And so it tells its own story about a moment, actually my favorite moment in the book, that I think is a really cool way of like reimagining. And so if the art form asks you to reimagine, I think you should. So I'll read you some of the quotes that I grabbed. So this is a great way to save favorite quotes. If you read a book and you're just like so inspired, you can write down your quotes and put them in a zine and tuck that into the pages of the book. I think that's really beautiful. You can reimagine things, you can rewrite them, you can evolve them, you can splice them together in new and fantastic ways. So this is called When a Container is Broken, It Does Not Destroy Its Contents, It Sets Them Free. So the first page is just a section about the teeth. Are your daughters not born from teeth? Does your house not walk on chicken feet? If anyone can cut the unbreakable rope, it is you. The second page or second poem I chose was I do not want to think of what comes after. I do not want to think that what comes after is your fault. I do not want to think that the ending could have been changed. And so, and then the whole book fell apart. Let's get that book back in there. I'll tell you guys how this was made in a moment. But as you can see, like 2 poems fit really nicely in this space. I've got a cover that's got some, maybe think of like 10 words or less on here. And then I've got 2 poems here. Poems, they're quotes, but the book was so lyrical, they're poems. And then the middle page, usually when I do a zine, the middle page will be a longer poem. So it'll be something that spans the edges. So when you open the middle, kind of like a middle spread in a magazine, you open it up to the most grandiose page and you have a spread that can flow from one side to the other. You can do this on either sets of pages. Each page can be a spread, but it doesn't have to. And I kind of like the art form being like tiny, tiny. So this poem, little collection, is made of tracing paper. And then I've tucked in, let me see if I can show you, inside the pages I've tucked in other pieces of paper. So it really just looks like this. It's just tracing paper. Tracing paper is actually pretty gentle on the typewriter. And then I have this piece of paper that is the top of the house. And so that went in kind of the middle. Let's see if we can get it back in there. That one in the middle, and then I have my legs here. And the cool part about this is if I was like, I don't like how that would turn out, you can always make adjustments. So How did you type each section on the tracing paper? Excellent question. So I have this typewriter. So on the tracing paper, I'll show you the real paper just to make it a little easier to see. So this is Ollie. Apologies for how clunky the technology is. So here's my gal. So does anyone have a typewriter? Are we asking typewriter questions because you have one? Are you asking for the technicality or just a visual? If you are asking, oh, thank you. Both, excellent. You got it. So if you're making a zine with collage, it's super easy. Just write on the zine. If you're making a zine in a typewriter, everything has to be upside down, and it requires like a lot of this. So if I want to write, this is actually a great discussion. This is not where I thought it would go, but here we are. I love it. So everybody has folded their papers, I assume. So I'm just gonna have you hold your zine in your hand just for a second, just so that we're all on the same page. Grab one of the pages and let it kind of flay out. So the top of your zine is going to have two creased folds. So it'll have two parts that are open, that's our mouth, and then two creased folds, and the bottom of your zine will be all open. All of the pieces will be open. It'll just be kind of like this. That's the bottom. Everybody following? I hope. The top is going to have your folds. So as you're creating something, say you're using a typewriter, say you're using a printer, something that needs you to know where the top is going to be where the creases are. So if I want to print on my cover, if I've established that this is the cover and this is the back, I'm going to fold it in half. I'm going to expose page 3, and I'm going to put it through the typewriter like this. And literally the whole time, I'm like, oh, wrong. Oh, this is what I want to do. Once you get front and back done, and this is also kind of like a tip. If you get the front and back with some kind of ink on it, then you have a great understanding of where you are on the zine. So I'm just going to pop them in there. All right. Maybe I'm not. Stage difference. Come on, love. Maybe we won't go that way. Maybe we want to go that way. You do have to kind of fight your machine sometimes. So as you can see, back, third page, once it comes up, now I'm going to make sure that I type on this side. So what should we call it? There's a great quote in there. They say before the shows, raise the ghost. So we'll do that. Okay. So now I have a cover with a title and a back is just a draft. Please do drafts. Don't even worry if the first one you do is crazy. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. So now that I have this, I know where I am in the book. I know that this is page 3. I know that this is page 2 and 1. I know that this is page 3 or 5. So sorry, 4 and 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'll show you what that looks like in some of my other work. So if this is also on tracing paper. If I have this one, sometimes I will put a little number on the corner of each page. Again, oops, lost it. You want to make sure that the reader feels like they're oriented. They know which direction they're going. They know that this is all one poem. They know it's all one poem because it sprawls across and it's very clear, but there's only one number on this page and it's 3. They know that these are 2 separate things, 4 and 5. So as you design your zines, you certainly don't have to do it this way. This is entirely and wildly optional. But as you design your zines and you create a piece, and that's really what I want you to think about. When you create a piece that is whole into itself, this is one thing and it's done. When you've created something, you want to invite the reader in whether the reader is yourself in a couple of years when you find this tucked away somewhere, or if it's a gift, or if you're submitting it somewhere. There are lots of places that take zine submissions, lots of places that collect zines. It's actually this really cool thing. You want to make sure that whoever's holding this really understands where they are and really understands why they're holding this and what the message is. Yes, watercolor paper, great question. We'll get to that in a moment. Really understands what it is that you're trying to explain to them. So we just got a question in the chat about watercolor paper. Yes and no. So this charcoal slash like drawing paper is very difficult on the wheel because it's thick. If you think about it, it's it's really 8 pieces of paper in at one time. So that's why I find myself really recently doing a lot more tracing paper. A single piece of paper on a typewriter is totally fine. You just want to be careful of like wear and tear and how thick the paper is. So my suggestion for watercolor paper would be something like this. If you wanted to type on something like sturdy and hard, maybe you type on it and you tear it up. This is something, these were done on like cardstock almost. So if you have pages that you've like done artwork on, couple options. You could always like copy and print them. That kind of is a convoluted way to do it. You could tear them up and like recollage them in your final form. This I have that's cardstock that I use as my base for some of these is way too thick for my typewriter. Having 4 or 5 layers of this in the wheel would break. So you just want to be careful of your machine. I think the Olympias are a little more delicate than like some of the real old school typewriters, like those big ones. I think you would be okay. But just like listen to the machine that you're using if you're using a typewriter. Didn't realize I get so many typewriter questions. I love this. So keep them coming. Back to zines, back to conversations. So in this particular zine, which is also based on Thistlefoot, what I did was I typed out 2 pages worth of content. So I was on page 371, if you have this book. And I really loved those pages because they just described like a really ordinary experience in the day of the life of Baba Yaga and her 2 daughters. And so I felt like, if I could be so bold, I felt like that's where the whole story was. Like there's all these other things that happened, all these amazing things, all these sad things, all these strange things. But to me, the story and the folklore itself was in the experience that she had with them. So if it's okay, I'm just going to read what I came up with. So I did not write any of these words. These words were straight from the book. So page 371, kind of by the bottom. And so what's really cool about writing and poetry and repurposing other people's work and creating it in small format is that you're able to create a new perspective and a new conversation. So this little zine is called Sweeten with Time, A Holy Unhappening. And these are all little bits from those 2 pages. A starving crow living inside her has worn itself down until the name, smooth as a worry stone, a moment of stillness, the widow is left alone. Little babushka Yaga with 2 daughters, a wasp's glossy wing, a brood of chickens, steals stories to take home, would do anything for her happiness, snaps the yarn with her teeth. Maybe she will grow backwards, only an infant, though she does not know it. Gifts of honey on the tongue, keep singing, trying to peck its way out. Rosewater, a small scrap of silk, together they are content. And then at the back, I did have a little bit. Bless them for how unstoried they are. So that's not what it says in the book. Those are the words that are in that space in the book. So I would even say, like, as a writer, if you're getting blocked or you're getting stuck, just like type or write something out or type it on the computer and cut it out and just put back together things that get you reinterested in telling the story. So this was crazy and all over the place. I do want to transition and talk a little bit about personal folklore and kind of telling stories in short form, if you will indulge me. Thank you, Sally. It's so weird. Sally just said she's enjoying it. It's so weird because this is such a weird, like, non-interactive format. So I hope everyone is having a good time. And if you're all over the place like I am, then perhaps this is helping quiet your brain. My brain is all over the place all the time. So I did take some notes on Thistlefoot itself and about storytelling. So I just want to reiterate that GennaRose wrote this really incredible story that captures both event memory and emotional memory. So I do want to sit for a moment and think about, or maybe just meditate in or meditate on this idea that there are things that happened in our past. Maybe it's our personal past, maybe it's like our family's past, the longevity of our past. And then there are the ways that we feel about them. And so, maybe you guys are holding your zines in your hands. I always think it's good to like have something in your hands. As you think about that and you can physically feel how small this space is, I want you to think about what would be more compelling for you, like telling a story or telling the emotion of that story. And sometimes the best thing to do is just to say the facts. The facts are loud enough and intense enough and they matter and it's what happened. And sometimes what happened speaks for itself. But I would argue more often than not, there's a little bit of kind of pull emotionally, empathetically in the way that we process. And so to me, and in my work and in the things that I lean into, I'm always more fascinated by the ways that I am telling a story to tell something either about what happened or about how I feel about it. So that was convoluted. Think on that. So really imagine like personal history is both the events that occurred and how you feel about them. And I think GennaRose did a beautiful job. Again, I just can't say enough about this book. There are so many pieces of this story that create doubt and ambiguity is a librarian term we use. It's not good if you have ambiguity in an information system, but in this case, it's really beautiful because you have room for interpretation and you have room to kind of revisit and re-examine what it is that matters to you. And I think in a story like this, especially that spans many generations, different things matter to different people in different generations. And so I would argue that, Baba Yaga's experience is more focused on safety and survival, where, the current characters are also going through quite a bit. But our lived experience is much more about joy. It's much more about being present. It's much more about getting something out of it. And I think that there are characters in this space that are just getting through it. And so that can be really difficult to tell a story about survival from the perspective of joy and experience, and vice versa. I think that there is a lot of distance between some of what we've gone through and what our ancestors have gone through, and maybe they would look at us and think like, wow, that's so silly, you're worried about that. And so I think there's room to like tell and retell stories in new lenses, but also we want to be conscious of what the drives are, what the important things are. So think on that. And I wrote this today, and I'm going to read what I wrote because it was the best way I could have written it. We cannot tell stories without our emotions concerning what happened. We stay, we over-explain, or we leave, we take out spaces that most appeal to what we're trying to say about what was and who we are, not because of it. Let me say that again. We're trying to say about what was and who we are because of it. Apologies. So what are you leaving in and what are you removing as part of the storytelling process? What are you emphasizing? What are you staying on? What are you lingering on? And what are you kind of pushing aside? I hope that makes sense. And then I want to just acknowledge, again, just read the book, but in the book itself, we're invited into the house. The house is a character. The house is a fascinating character, but we're invited into someone's house. We're invited into Baba Yaga's house as it remains, and we're invited in to take a look, and we look around, and as the reader, we experience. And so as it pertains to this art form, what do you want to come into, and what do you want to look at? What do you want to linger on? What do you want to pick up? And again, short form, but just a little bit. What little tidbit, what little bookmark, what little flash of history or self-identity can you put in? So I have some quotes, and I think Bridget was going to drop them in the chat if now is a good time. Bridget, I've completely gone off of my whole thing, so we're way out of, oh, perfect. Thank you. We're way out of order. I had such grand ideals, and then I got lost in the weeds. So as we kind of gather ourselves to make some zines together, I hope you're all still with me, and this hasn't been too ADHD for everyone. I would love for you to consider or to think on or to maybe write on for a moment or two some of these prompts. So I have 3 prompts for you. The first is, how might the stories that haunt you be retold? Is there something that you're processing that can be retold from a different angle? Is there a little bit of grace you can offer yourself, the past? Is there something that can be shifted? Is there something that can be evolved in the way that we tell that story? What can we retell? And sometimes it's just a smidge. Sometimes you have to really reorient yourself, and that's okay. So maybe you take some notes, maybe you scribble down some things for that. The second one is a really simple prompt, but I felt like there was a lot of room. Ask your ancestors one question. It can be anything. It can be, why did you plant an orange tree and not a different kind of fruit? It can be a more difficult question. Why did you leave? It can be something to do with your recent lineage. It can be something from someone you knew. It can be something from long, long back. So think about that. And then the last one, bring one thing with you 100 years in the future. My typewriter is here, but I've actually brought one thing with me 100 years in the future. This is my great-great-grandparents' matchbox. It's probably 200 years old. And so this is something that I have with me all the time. It's one of my very magical things. And they had a house full of, my grandfather and my grandmother had a house full of antiques that were distributed, throughout the family. But this was like, oh, can I have the matchbox? And so, for all the witchy things, but mostly because of how beautiful it is. And this is such a relic. They don't make matches that fit in it anymore. There's like a gap. So the usefulness has passed it. But take an object. It can be a physical object that you have. It can be something that you remember. It can be something you lost. But think about an object and bring it 100 years from now, or bring it 100 years from when it was made. Play around with that. Think on that. I'm going to get myself slightly organized, and we're going to make some zines together. And I'm just going to tap my phone to see what time it is and how we're doing on time. We're doing pretty good on time. Excellent. Somehow we landed right on time. So if you're writing some prompts and you want to just take a minute to do that, if you want to share any of your thoughts, I am seeing some of the chat things pop up. So in a real workshop, in person, this is real, but in an in-person workshop, we would probably share and we would probably engage that way. So if I see what you wrote pop up, or if Kathleen wants to jump in, she sees something compelling, please do. I'd love to talk about it. I think when we think about the past, and when we think about the present, and when we think about things that are brief, I'm always kind of drawn to the idea of conversation and how much can be said in so few words. And so for those of you here for the technical part of the workshop, I'm just going to talk about space for a little bit while you write. You don't really want to put too many words on the cover. I would say aim for 10 or 12 maximum. Sometimes 2 or 3 will do it. If you're using a printer paper, it'll be a smidge smaller than this. But try and keep, if you're writing poems or you're writing quotes or you're writing content, you really want to look at this as being less than maybe 20 or so words, 20 or 30 words here. And that would be like real tight. Most of the poems that I write are only like 15. 20 words at the max. There's just, you want to leave some breathing room. Sometimes what happens with zines is people try and cram so much in there and you just don't get very much out of it. You're just like so overwhelmed. It makes me think of like a comic book. You're just like, where do I even look? So again, in this one, you've got two, if you're doing the 2 poems, 1 poem, 2 poems, you've got a spread you can work with, but I still wouldn't do more than 50 words, 50 words max. And so if you're typing something out on the computer or you're handwriting it in a notebook and you're going to convert, think about space-wise what there's actually room for. And again, same deal with these two, 20 or so words. And then I just put a very, very small little byline at the bottom. I don't spend a lot of time on the back cover. Sometimes you can do that. It's not a big deal, but I would just be very aware of that. If you are creating a zine that has collage or content, I want you to be really aware of the folds. So I'm going to grab some of the zines that have collage and then that I've made. These are my pandemic zines. They live in this box. They're pretty happy in this box. So stuff looks great if it's just paper, it's fine. But you can add a lot of splashiness with more stuff. Here's a real collagey one. That's not the one I wanted to show you. Yeah, so I just want you to be pretty aware of the center fold lines. And I don't think this is a good example. So here, there was some stuff on the fold that got curled over. So as you think about, like, you'll assemble your page and it's gorgeous and you've done an amazing job. And then you go to fold it and like all of the physics are bad. So just think about as you fold, here's another example of stuff that got kind of mushed on the crease. So if you're writing and you're like collaging across this fold, what you're gonna have to do is snip what you have and glue it on and leave like, I don't know, like a millimeter between the gaps. So from a technicality standpoint, for those of you that are like gonna be mishmashing things in here, just really be aware of that this is a book. This is not a piece of paper. This is not a poster board. Like this is gonna move. And you have no control over how people are going to handle it. Probably what's going to happen is people are going to open it and be like, oh my God, this is amazing. And they're right, it will be amazing, but all of the delicate things that you've put together are going to be like, they're, kind of in the wind. So that is something to think about. And then if you're going to be doing tracing paper, what I've done, my favorite way to make zines is to type them on tracing paper. And then I tuck pieces of origami paper, specifically origami paper because it's so thin, inside the sides. So now you have this like kind of two-tone. So this is the color of the paper, and this is the effect of having the tracing paper on it. Most printers will print on tracing paper. Just buy a lot of tracing paper because sometimes they eat the tracing paper. Typewriters do super well. Pen and Sharpie do super well on it. And then you have this two-tone effect that's really enchanting. So that's my favorite way to do it. That's my like best kept secret. That's not a secret. So I don't know if you guys are still writing on your prompts or if you are sick of that and you want to glue stuff together. So let's talk a little bit about zines and what you may need. I know some of you brought materials, but I'm just going to kind of name out some materials as we go. So the first thing that we folded together that you will need is a piece of paper. Sometimes it can be plain paper. Sometimes it can be colorful paper. The thing to think about if it's really cool paper, so this is like two-sided paper. We have a question from Twitch. I used cardstock was the best way finding it. That's a great question. These do not require any binding. The binding is the fold. Now, if you're doing something where you also wanted to like sew it together, you certainly could do that. But I don't, to be this type of zine, I don't think you need anything to hold it together. If you wanted to make sure that like nobody was able to open it, which I think is maybe your question. If that's wrong, let me know. Is you would get it in half in page 3, cover and back, and you could sew along this line and it would still work, but then you wouldn't be able to open it and make copies. I think that is your question. If that is not your question, please ask it again and I will try to answer it in a way that is helpful. But this piece of paper has 2 sides. You're only going to see one or the other. So we can choose the light side or the dark side. But when I fold it, I'm going to choose the dark side because it's loud. When I fold it, you're not going to be able to see the inside because that'll become the inside of the paper. So think about that when you're choosing your materials. I'm going to fold with this dark paper so that we can see it a little better. You guys can't tell, but I'm like in the corner. Oh no, I missed that chat. Nope, gone. Just kidding. Maybe it'll come back. As you're folding, just keep that in mind. You won't get some pages that are light, you won't get some pages that are dark, you'll just get one side or the other side. But a cool thing could be doing zine stuff on both sides and then having it be refoldable. I've never actually done that. So I told you, I promised we would fold again, so we're gonna fold again. Is anyone like super stuck? Anybody like really stuck on the folds? Because I will take a moment now to fold if you would like. Nobody's super stuck. That's okay. You can let me know if you're super stuck at any time. So you're gonna want a piece of paper. As I mentioned before, I like to use bigger than 8.5 by 11. It makes what I'm working with a teeny tiny bit bigger. Not a ton. I've done some zines that were like ginormous. I was a little bit confused on the numbering in the handout. Don't know the numbering in the handout. I'm not looking at the handout. Are you talking about the folding part? So we'll fold together again. Hold that thought. Let me just finish this one. So together, we have a piece of paper. We're gonna fold down the side, the middle. So hard. I'm like talking and watching myself doing it. Yes, be sure for that. Yes. I don't remember the numbering. I'm so sorry. I will take a look at that. Maybe if you have a question, you can email me. Kathleen, you're welcome to share my email with that person. Or everyone. You can all email me. So this is the halfway. So we're folding halfway. Who teaches online courses? Yes, there's so many great online tutorials as well. This. Okay. And now we're going to fold in our sides. So one side and the other side, and make sure you fold in both directions. This is going very smoothly because I've already done it. Okay, and now we're going to fold it in half. Fold it in half. This is our seam. This is our seam. We're going to cut halfway on the fold. And then open. We've got our mouth. We're going to pinch together. Now we have like kind of a cross there. And then we're going to let the book tell us where it wants to be. So see how I'm like fighting it? Just let it tell you where it wants to be folded. And then as you make that fold, you're going to be pretty rough with it. You know, make sure that it gets down there. And then you're going to have this one edge that doesn't want to, yeah, you don't have to write numbers on them. You have this one edge that doesn't want to be folded all the way down. You're just going to kind of ease that piece into it. So if you're using cardstock, you're going to get like kind of a crunchy fold on the last page. And that's totally okay. Totally fine. We just make that our last page and nobody's that worried about it. So does anybody have any part of their prompt that they want to put in the chat, or anything that they'd like to share? I would love to get little bits and pieces of your experience. Anybody? Pop those in as you feel comfortable. So a couple things that you should have as you're zining. To protect my table, I have this glass kind of cutting board. That makes it easier if I'm like really pushing into the seams. I have a pair of scissors. They don't have to be this hefty. But it's something that I think I just like certain sizes of scissors. You can use kitty scissors or little ones. You could use an X-Acto knife. That would make you much braver than me, but if you want to, you certainly can. And then I just have some stick glue. Some of you will have way fancier glues. Oh, awesome. I'm just seeing a comment about somebody putting them together. So I give myself grace. Oh, that's beautiful. Someone shared that the stories that haunt them are the ones that they give themselves grace in retelling. And this is a great spot for those. Also from Twitch, oh, they would bring a playlist from 100 years ago of music to enjoy in the future. That's really fascinating because I feel like we only hear the hits, right? And then we lose some of the nuance. And some of your favorite stuff, some of your favorite songs or artists don't get carried that far in the future. You really have to be like top 20 sometimes. That's a really beautiful thing to bring into the future. Thanks, Twitch folks. So glue is great. Sometimes I'll use washi tape. Sometimes I type on washi tape. I don't know if you guys have ever tried that, those of you with typewriters. You can put tape on this wheel and then move it back and forth. We'll see if I can do that at the end here. Sometimes it's a little tricky. And then of course, like whatever kind of pens that you like to use, whatever kinds of scraps. I've known a lot of folks that like to do collage in their original zine and then copy, make reproductions of the zine when it's finished. That's a really cool way to take something that was temporary and make it more permanent. So those are the supplies that I use. I probably should have started with that. So if anybody needs to run and get supplies for a moment, we won't go too far ahead. I was going to show you my process in creating something from GennaRose's book into a zine. I probably won't make the whole zine, but I'm going to talk you through how I process making a zine that is more more based on someone else's work rather than my own. So if that's okay with everyone, we'll do that as our last section. And again, if you have questions or something comes to you or you're just like so stuck on the fold still, please pop that in the chat. I know it's probably really weird to watch me like pause and read, but I want to have as much interactiveness. Yes. So how much time do we have left, Kathleen? Are we okay? Just saw. Oh, we have 3.
You're
Is
good on
this
time, Emily. Feel
okay?
free
Perfect.
to, if you want to go a little bit longer, it's totally fine.
Okay, perfect. For those of you that I could only have until 7, it was so great to have you. We'll maybe go another 15 minutes. So if you're writing your own content, that is awesome. I encourage you to. I think this is such a great way to like get a draft out of your body. Sometimes if I'm going to go write like longer poetry, I need to write something really quick. I've known authors that do prose that just need to like get something out real early in the beginning and just like kind of get their jitters out of their body. So again, if any of you missed it, I usually treat this as the cover and I usually treat this as the back. Then I'll usually treat this as page 1, page 2. I'll usually have a spread of 3 in the middle. That's not mandatory, but sometimes it kind of breaks up some of the monotony. And then I'll usually have page 4 and page 5. And so each of these things, 1 poem, 2 poem, 3rd poem, 4th poem, 5th poem. If that speaks to you, awesome. If that doesn't, and you're like, I'm not doing that, that's totally fine. But that's kind of how I lay out the anatomy of that space. And so when I'm looking at something from a book, I'll do a lot of found poetry. I really enjoy it as a process piece. How do you normally do your zines? Do you process alone? Sometimes I share them. That's a great question. I got a question about sharing zines or doing them by myself. This was like being so out of my mind alone in my house that I just like had to make something. So I made bookmarks and zines, and then I did end up sharing them. Kathleen actually shared them in her big exhibit of all the art that was made during the pandemic. So that's when they got shared. But they live in this box. So sometimes stuff isn't worth seeing the light. Some of these saw the light. So I would say I make a lot of process poetry, and I make a lot of found poetry, and I make a lot of erasure poetry that is just for me, that is not noteworthy, that is not amazing. Make more folds. It's a great question. Anna had a question about making more folds in the zine. So in this format, we only have that many pages. Now, and this may have been the question from before. Now, if you want to do many, this is probably what the question was from before. If you want to do many and you want to sew them together, I would recommend for you that you look up YouTube videos. There's a great artist called Sea Lemon. She's a really beautiful process bookbinder. She makes a ton of stuff. Her videos are very accessible. And I would look up Coptic Stitch, Coptic. It's a very old school, originated in Africa stitch, where you punch holes in each of them. Coptic, thank you. Kathleen popped that in the chat. And you loop in, and it's a way to sew things together on the outside. Oh, look, Kathleen's got the thing. Perfect. That video taught me how to bookbind. So if you are interested in that, full recommend. She's amazing. From many years ago, that video is probably a decade old. So you could make more pages together. That's a great question. I'm sorry that I am answering questions as I'm talking and I'm unable to finish a sentence. But just to finish that thought, there's a really great way to take somebody's work. So we'll just bring it back to Thistlefoot one more time, and put it in a way that you can reuse. So this came from chapter 22. It's a really beautiful scene where Baba Yaga is combing her oldest daughter's hair. I hope I'm saying her name right. I've been saying her name as Ilya in my head, but maybe it's Illa. And she is talking about what it's like to thanks, Connie. What it's like to be controlled or retain control. So this passage, it's page 185. This passage stuck out to me on my first read. To be honest, I've read this book like 3 times in order to prepare for this. I was so nervous. But upon my first reading, that stuck out to me so vividly, because it was this intimate moment between a mother and a daughter, and it had such nefarious undertones because it was this like cross section of their life that is so normal. And I have a stepdaughter who has the curliest hair in the world, and I don't know what to do with it. And so we spent a lot of time brushing her hair, and it was a really beautiful moment that was kind of infiltrated by Baba Yaga's concern for the future and her awareness of the dangers of the world. And so what I did on my typewriter, and you could certainly just write this by hand if you do any kind of hand lettering or calligraphy, you could certainly rewrite it by hand. You don't need a typewriter, but man, you can get your hands on one. That's the best. This is my favorite thing on the planet. And what I've done is I've rewritten kind of word for word, have some errors in there. And I've given myself space. So it's just all day little Ilya plays in the town square, and all night Baba Yaga yanks out the knots in her daughter's hair with a bone comb. Compelling sentence. And so if I was making this as a whole zine, the way that I did the first one here, and this was probably 2 pages worth of content, I would type it all out, and then I would give myself space. Oops, excuse me. I would give myself space here because we're gonna rip it. Yes, there's some talk. There's great talk in the chat about other workshops. I encourage you, keep workshopping, y'all. So I would just tear it. And if you're using, my favorite is charcoal paper. There's just like this rich, amazing texture with it that does super well in the typewriter. It does super well if you're writing, if you do any kind of like fountain pens, the ink just kind of like bleeds so gorgeously. And so what I would do then, and forgive me, I'm kind of talking while I'm doing, is I would tear out these little bits of paper. So now I have pieces that I can work with. And I would take a moment and I would tear this all apart. And then each of those pieces would get glued together in a different order. And so when you are able to like lay it all out on your table, or if you have a space for that, or on the floor is a great place to do art. You're able to retell a different kind of story with the words that are on this page. So, instead of having it talk about just her hair, we might have a different impression of what the story is trying to tell us. So that my plan was to do that while we were going, and I didn't realize no one else was going to be able to talk. So I don't want to leave too much empty silence there. Charcoal paper, yes. So if I could just kind of pitch so this is drawing paper, but you guys, I'm sure have seen these in Michael's. This particular pad, they go on sale all the time. This is, I think it's 9x12. This makes a great zine. This is great for art. This is great for Ilya. So I was saying it right. That is great for making things. So I would probably grab one of these pieces of typed content and make it the cover. So, I might call this zine, "You Must Never Allow a Knot." And then the first poem might be something like, "Pulling Ilya never cries with a bone comb, for this is how men through think the sailors, tie the knots, leash the wind, Baba Yaga yanks her daughter's hair." So messy process. Yes, I'm sort of thought this would be a little bit quicker to put together, but now I'm realizing I'm just sort of staring at myself talking. So maybe we won't put this together, but conditioning. So as you're looking at creating something from another person's work, what I would really recommend is finding a passage that speaks to you, finding a story that speaks to you. If you have like letters or conversations or texts from somebody you loved who maybe's gone, or from, a story you want to retell, I think it can be really, really exuberating to retell it, to rewrite it. So what I would do here, sorry, this is all chaotic, is I would just get my stuff in order and I would just have it in a different order. And if I wanted it to change, I would kind of move it around. So that's sort of what this poem was in this scene. So you can kind of see how they turn out a little bit. And they look a little crazy. It's sort of like a ransom note to the past, but you're able to create a dialogue with the story that still exists, right? I'm not changing the book. I'm not taking it apart. But I'm just sort of borrowing the content. And so for me, I feel like that's really compelling. And it's really, it's like got a healing energy to it. If you get stuck and you want to rewrite something that's happened to you. All right, ransom. Yes, almost lost you. So does anybody have any thoughts, questions? Can I answer any more zine or typewriter questions? There we go. Almost lost you. Is anybody excited to read the book? I can give you some inspiration for those of you that are holding the book on pages that I think would make really compelling found poems. So pages 85 and 86 I thought were really, really great. Pages 185 and 186, I really enjoyed. Page 24. Page 373 through 382 is a really tough section, but I think if you're willing to sit with it, you could pull out some really great stuff. And then pages 418 through 427. And of course, my favorite page in the book was 371. There was something that popped in the chat that I'm going to try and answer. Where can you find ribbons for old typewriters? Great question. I have never replaced the ribbon on this typewriter. I do this really toxic thing where I just rewind it. And that's been okay so far. But you can find typewriter ribbons on Etsy. Etsy is a great resource for old things. That's actually where I found this typewriter. But you can find ribbons, and there are people that have made like dual color ribbons and have recolored them in like fantastic kind of neon new shades that they never would have been at the time. My only concern would be just making sure that you understand the size of your typewriter and then testing the ribbon just to make sure that it doesn't get ink all over your typewriter. But yeah, does anybody in the chat want to share what kind of typewriters they have? I'm not a typewriter expert, but I'm always excited when people can bring things from the past into working reality. And while we're talking about that, I would just like to say thank you. I really appreciated this. It was your mother's 1940s royal. Okay, so royal typewriters are gorgeous. They're very fancy. It's that's like a privilege to have that. And if it's your parents, then it was probably taken really good care of. So thank you for sharing. I just want to say this was a pleasure. I'm sorry this was so chaotic. I know this was an experiment. So I think we learned that the chat's gonna pop up and it's gonna be great. I think it's really awesome that you guys are interested in making things, making small things. About zines, I think zines can be a relief, right? Because they're not so serious. You don't have to write a whole book. You don't have to write a whole set of poems. You don't have to create a whole, lineage of things. You can just write something really quick. Yeah, and I think it's a really beautiful process in order to make something from start to finish that's just yours. So thank you. Thanks for being on this ride with me. I'm seeing some more typewriter talk. Somebody bought one at an auction. I saw a manual one. Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you, everybody. So I'm gonna hand it back to Kathleen because this got chaotic at the end. But thank you, everyone, for joining us here and on Twitch. Yes, I really loved it. I'm seeing some names I'm familiar with. It's good to see you, Anna. Yes, and thank you all. Oh,
Emilee, thank you so much. And Gail, I just wanted to say you have a 1930s vintage Royal Manual typewriter. That's amazing. Everyone, thank you so much again, Emilee, for your workshop today, and for your love of Thistlefoot. It really is an incredible book.
It's so good.
For everyone in chat, we've shared a few links. So if you are interested, I think in our follow-up email if you registered on Zoom, we'll send you a follow-up email with a survey and some links that we shared to Emilee's work, to our upcoming Nevada Reads events. I wanted to let you all know that we are going to be streaming online with GennaRose Nethercott, the author of Thistlefoot, on our Twitch channel on Wednesday, September 14th at 4 p.m. Pacific. So if you've had the chance to meet GennaRose at one of her Nevada events, you just know that she is such a amazing, incredible, charismatic person. This is your chance to ask her all the questions about her book. We're also hoping to bring back GennaRose next year. Really excited about that. We have some upcoming events next month at the end of September. So if you're living in Nevada right now, if you're in Reno or Las Vegas, we are working to bring Morgan Jerkins, who is the author of Wandering in Strange Lands, which is a really thoughtful nonfiction book about tracing her lineage and ancestry. So for anyone interested in genealogy, especially tracing Black history and genealogy, that is what Morgan's book is about. Morgan will be giving an author's talk at Sundance Books and Music in Reno, and then she'll also be flying down to Vegas the night after that to give I guess she'll be in conversation with Clay T. White, who is the director of the Oral Research History Center at UNLV, and those two will be at the Writer's Block in Las Vegas. So some in-person events with Morgan. And then, of course, if you're not already signed up for our email newsletter or following us on social media, please do. This is, I think, the best way to stay in touch with us and learn more about our Nevada Reads and Nevada Humanities events. And then if you end up making a zine after tonight that's either inspired by Thistlefoot, inspired by any of the prompts that Emilee shared with you, please share them with us. You can email us at info@nevadahumanities.org, or you can tag us on social media. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have Twitter/X. You can also email Emilee and tag her on Instagram as well. I know that she would love, love, love to see them. Finally, Emilee, I would love to do a second workshop with you in the future. We have chatted with about this. So if you would be interested in more sort of like advanced techniques, like I don't know if you demonstrated like, the little part that folds out and you like put things in your zines, like that would be a lot of fun to do in a second workshop.
Mhm.
So we'll keep you all updated on that. And of course, in-person workshops, we always love working with Emilee, and especially if you're in Southern Nevada. But yeah, thank you again, everyone, so much. We hope that this was productive and helpful and, like just a nice cozy space for you if you were just listening tonight. The recording will be up on our YouTube channel soon if you want to follow along. And again, stay updated with us on social media and our email newsletter if you want to, if you want to attend our second workshop in the future. So yeah, thank you again so much, Emilee. Thank you everyone who joined us on Twitch. It was just really wonderful seeing all of your enthusiasm, the love for zines, the love for storytelling, and I hope you'll have a wonderful rest of your nights. Okay, bye everyone. Thank you again, Emilee.
Thank you.